It's nearly November and you know what that means. Baking season. So what do you do when you are elbow deep into a cookie or cake recipe, but when you go to the pantry to get an ingredient, you discover you're out? You substitute what you do have. Today we'll be going over 12 substitutions that you can use for common ingredients. I've used recipes that called for allspice maybe 3 or 4 times. Instead of buying a jar that will sit on your shelf until it loses its flavor, you can make your own by mixing 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, and 1/4 teaspoon of ground cloves. This will make a total of 1 teaspoon of allspice, so adjust your amounts as needed. While having spice blends in your pantry can be handy, they can also be very expensive and they take up space. I prefer to have separate ingredients that I can blend myself. I like to bake, and many recipes call for baking powder to give cakes a lighter, airier texture. Without the baking powder, your cake will fall flat, so don't leave it out. But if you don't have any on hand, you can create a substitute. For each teaspoon of baking powder called for in the recipe, use 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda plus 1/2 teaspoon of white vinegar. This will ensure that your cake will rise to the occasion. I don't buy brown sugar anymore because it is so easy to make. For every cup of brown sugar, add 1 to 2 tablespoons of molasses, 1 tablespoon for a light brown sugar, and 2 tablespoons for dark brown sugar. That's it. And now I don't have to have a canister of white sugar and a canister of light brown sugar and a canister of dark brown sugar sitting on my shelf. Plus, I get to control how light or dark I want my brown sugar to be. If you're out of butter, you can substitute an equal part of either coconut oil or, if you're trying to cut calories, applesauce. Applesauce will add sweetness, so it may not be appropriate for all recipes. Does anyone actually buy buttermilk? I never have, but I do have many recipes that call for it. So I put 1 tablespoon of vinegar in a measuring cup, then fill the cup with milk. Yes, it will clabber, and that's fine, but it gives your recipe just a bit of tang that makes it extra yummy. By the way, welcome to the old Mayfield place. I'm Snow the farmer's wife, and I teach you to be more self-sufficient in so many ways, such as growing your own food, using herbal medicine, and preserving food for long-term storage. When you need a cup of cream but don't have any in the house, you can use 3/4 of a cup of milk plus 1/4 of a cup of melted butter to get the same results in your recipe. But this substitution won't work for whipped cream. If you need to make whipped cream, I'm afraid you're going to have to go to the store. Cream of tartar is another ingredient that I rarely have on hand, but substituting an equal amount of white vinegar or lemon juice into my recipe works just fine. If your recipe calls for a liquid sweetener such as honey, molasses, or maple syrup, you can use any of these interchangeably if you don't have the exact one listed. Bear in mind that the final flavor may be a bit different since molasses has a much stronger flavor than either maple syrup or honey, but your baked good will still be delicious. If you are out of the vegetable oil you need for your baked good, you can use an equal amount of applesauce or mayonnaise to get a moist, delicious cake. But never substitute olive oil for vegetable oil in your baked goods unless you want your cake to taste like olive oil. As with the allspice we discussed earlier, you can create your own pumpkin pie spice with the separate ingredients. Just mix 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of ground ginger, 1/2 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, and 1/4 teaspoon of ground cloves. I have a few recipes that call for self-rising flour that I make maybe once or twice a year, so it doesn't make sense to keep 5 pounds of self-rising flour on hand. I can easily create my own by putting 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder plus 1/2 teaspoon of salt in a measuring cup, then topping it off with 1 cup of all-purpose flour. I don't use shortening, and I haven't for years because there are more healthy choices such as coconut oil, butter, or lard. Use the equal amount of each instead of the shortening in your favorite recipes. Other ingredients that are interchangeable are sour cream and yogurt, lemon juice and vinegar, or apple juice and wine. Thank you for stopping by the old Mayfield place today. Stay healthy, get to baking, and have a blessed week.